Ukrainian forces turned the approaches into an absolute death trap. The Russians wouldn't have known what hit them. Russia tried to send reinforcements, but their armoured vehicles were destroyed on the move by other Ukrainian drones, eliminating them before they could help, turning the backbone of the Kremlin's consumer economy into a burning liability. As Ukraine blunts a failing Russian summer offensive and drones blitz Putin's retail depots and oil refineries, there are major updates from Ukraine. I'm Philip Ingram, and this is Battle Plans Exposed. The Russian rate of advance remains low, 2.5 months into Russia's struggling spring/summer offensive, which has failed to make any significant gains. Russian forces have advanced just 37 square kilometres in July, smaller than the area of Manhattan and tiny compared to the massive size of the whole of the front line. Inside Russia, it seems the only deliveries that are coming on time are the delivery of drones striking Wildberries retail sites. Ukrainian forces have hit close to 20 separate Wildberries facilities since launching its focused long-range drone campaign, dragging Putin's economy into chaos. Today's maps focus on a high-stakes 4-hour-long battle in the Donetsk region, a masterpiece of defence engineering in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and a stealth operation on a Russian convoy headed for Crimea. But first, let's look at what's happening on the front lines. This dramatic footage, captured by a crew on board a ship in the Black Sea, shows the moment a long-range drone passes dangerously close to a commercial ro-ro cargo vessel. Flying low over the water, the Delta Wing UAV demonstrates how routine shipping routes off the Russian southern coast have transformed into an active battleground. This near miss highlights a rapidly escalating threat coming shortly after another ro-ro vessel, the Nazivta, was struck and set ablaze by drones just 20 nautical miles off Russia's key logistics hub of Novorossiysk. As Ukraine intensifies its long-range campaign, targeting the military supply lines feeding Russia's war effort, merchant shipping in the eastern Black Sea faces unprecedented risks as asymmetric drone warfare expands far beyond the front line. Now, in that clip, we see this Delta Wing drone. It looks very like a Shahad drone, but it could be a Ukrainian drone targeting shipping in there. I'd like your thoughts on that, if you have got any. Please put them below afterwards, and we'll address that next week. Ukraine is attacking lots of Russian grey fleet shipping in the region. The Russians are flying their drones over the region and will be flying them over ships as they try and target them into Ukraine itself. In broad daylight, operators from Ukraine's elite 6th Special Operations Forces Regiment executed a remarkably daring raid on a heavily fortified Russian position. Moving across the terrain with terrifying stealth and surgical precision, the team managed to close the distance completely undetected. You can see the ghillie suits that they're wearing, those suits that look as if they're wearing bushes and leaves. They're getting within just 1 metre of the enemy before revealing themselves. The sheer speed and surprise of the approach caught the Russian garrison completely off guard, leaving them with virtually zero time to react or mount a coordinated defence. Ukrainian operators eliminated 4 Russian soldiers in close quarters, whilst successfully capturing 2 others alive, securing vital tactical intelligence for this sector. This operation highlights the unmatched training and audacity defining Ukrainian special forces on the front line today, proving that even in broad daylight, precise small unit tactics can breach and dismantle fortified enemy positions with absolute surprise. It also shows the professionalism with which the Ukrainian special forces have compared to the surprise that the Russian troops were caught by, showing that they're not trained to the same sort of levels. It's an unfair fight when it's one-on-one. In an appalling display of deliberately targeted terror, shocking footage published by Ukrainian law enforcement captures the moment a Russian FPV drone stalked and attacked an unarmed civilian at a local farmer's market in Kherson. The footage shows the drone operator actively hunting the 52-year-old fruit vendor as he moved between market stalls in broad daylight, showing complete disregard for civilian life before detonating the explosive payload directly beside him. Miraculously, the vendor survived the strike, suffering severe shrapnel wounds, blast injuries, and heavy concussion. Ukrainian officials and Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha have documented the incident as a blatant war crime. highlighting a grim and daily reality along the Dnipro River, where Russian forces systematically use loitering munitions to hunt civilians, emergency responders and public transport across liberated Kherson. Now, putting this into context, the operator, that drone was an FPV drone being operated through a fibre optic cable. Someone had goggles on and could see exactly what they were doing. This is 4K video that's coming in. They knew this was a civilian target. There's no way could it be confused. This is quite clearly a war crime. And this is happening, as we've heard, on a daily basis across areas that are within range of Russian FPV drones. The civilians that are remaining in those areas are under huge risk just going about their daily business. Footage from the Eastern Front showcases the lethal synergy of Soviet-era airframes modified with modern Western precision weaponry. In a high-risk operational strike, a Ukrainian Air Force MiG-29 fighter jet flying at low level towards contested sector to target a fortified Russian military base, armed with a French-supplied AASM Hammer guided aerial bomb. The jet releases its rocket-boosted standoff payload, guiding the precision munitions directly into the heart of the enemy's stronghold and triggering a massive explosion that completely levels the facility. This strike highlights the pivotal role tactical aviation continues to play in dismantling Russian staging hubs, drone command posts and frontline troop concentrations before they can support ground assaults. By combining the extended rocket-powered range of French Hammer kits with low-altitude ingress tactics, Ukrainian pilots can bypass dense Russian air defense umbrellas to inflict immediate losses on Russian military infrastructure along the front line. Now, we're seeing the Ukrainians using an increasing number of fixed-wing aircraft with glide bombs. It's clear they have the confidence that they have destroyed or denuded the Russian air defense capability. This tactic of glide bombs using a dumb bomb with a smart kit attached to it to attack defensive positions on the other side is something that the Russians have been using to good effect and are still using to good effect across the front line. We're getting the Air Force, the Russian Air Force and the Ukrainian Air Forces in a much closer proximity. Next, we'll start to see air-to-air battles. Sensational footage reveals the catastrophic aftermath of a Ukrainian long-range drone strike on the massive Wildberries logistic hub in Alksin, located in Russia's Tula region. Plumes of thick black smoke and towering infernos can be seen rapidly engulfing the nearby 200,000 square metre facility, one of the largest distribution centres in central Russia. The overnight strike triggered massive secondary fires that swept through the sprawling complex, burning the entire facility down to the ground, despite emergency response efforts. The complete destruction of this giant logistics centre marks a staggering blow to both Russian commercial infrastructure and military supply lines, which Ukraine accuses of being leveraged for storage of dual-use military components and also supplying military supplies to the front line. But as a vital hub designed to eventually expand to 300,000 square metres and employ 15,000 workers, the multi-million-dollar facility has been effectively erased. This strike highlights Ukraine's relentless strategy of taking out massive economic and dual-use logistic targets deep inside Russian territory. Now, it is having the effect of disrupting supply lines to the Russian front lines, disrupting supply lines between the different logistic facilities, attacking the Russian economy and putting real pressure on the Russian banks. This is a fantastic tactic, hitting the Russians at so many different levels. And yes, it is a civilian logistic site, but it is a legitimate military target because it is storing and distributing not just dual-use components that the Russian military are using and Russian military manufacturing are using, but also military material that is being sent to the front line, whether it be uniforms and capabilities for the troops themselves or other logistic support to the front lines. Now turning our focus to the front line in the Donetsk region, where a bold Russian assault was stopped dead in its tracks. We're breaking down a massive, high-intensity Russian offensive that ended in a catastrophic failure for the Kremlin. This has happened around a number of different settlements. Novokomnechki, Vozhvenka, and Chartovy in this sort of area here. So we've effectively got a triangle in this area. The Russian command launched a coordinated multi-axis armoured assault aiming at breaching Ukrainian positions near the village of Shakove. But instead of a breakthrough, the occupiers ran headfirst into a steel wall orchestrated by the First Corps Azov of the National Guard of Ukraine. Now let's look at the map to understand the scale of what Russia committed to this 4-hour battle. Forces from the 41st Guards Combined Arms Army alongside heavy armour of the 90th Guards Tank Division pushed directly out of the Novo-Ekonomichny area, which is this sort of area. So it's trying to come up against the fortress belt of the cities of Kostanivka, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk and Lyman from the outside. The goal was to merge the columns and smash into the defence ring around Sharkovy, which is in the Kostanivka area, using dozens of tanks, armoured combat vehicles and light transport trucks. To guarantee ground movement, the occupiers attempted total air suppression. They flooded the sky with decoy drones and Lancet kamikaze UAVs to deny Ukrainian operators drone access, whilst heavy Tornado-S MLRS systems rained long-range precision fires to suppress Ukrainian defensive lines. The Russian offensive collapsed when the Ukrainian command anticipated their every move. Ukrainian forces turned the approaches to the Sharkovy into an absolute death trap. Heavy minefields halted the lead armoured vehicles, forcing Russian columns into narrow choke points. Ukrainian Air Force jets hit and destroyed critical bridges along the assault routes, cutting off Russian retreat and supply lines. When Russian combat engineers rushed forward to lay pontoon bridges over the damaged crossings, Ukrainian tactical aviation struck again, obliterating the pontoon equipment. Trapped between minefields and blown river crossings, the Russian columns were locked into place. That's when the First Corps of the Azov unleashed a synchronised fire assault using tube artillery, MLRS and strike UAVs. Ukrainian forces destroyed 7 tanks, 7 combat vehicles, 8 missile launchers, 47 light vehicles, and whilst over 123 Russian soldiers were killed in action. Now, this was an audacious attack from the Russians, showing that, as we've been describing for the last few weeks, their small infiltration tactics, they have now managed to put together what was probably, in reality, a regimental-sized, battalion/regimental-sized combined attack. Very bold for the area that they were trying to cover with such a small force. And it's just over a company group that has been completely destroyed in this. But it shows the Russians have still got the ability to try and bring together these all-arms operations. Ukrainian defences were very good indeed in using their minefields, their anti-tank ditches, and the natural defences from the river patterns and the roads that are across the area to channel the enemy forces into a pre-designed killing area. That killing area is where the Ukrainians will have used their tube artillery, their MLRS and their drones. They will have rehearsed and they will have already targeted their guns and their rockets into that position. The Russians wouldn't have known what hit them. Now turning our focus to the neighbouring Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, where Ukrainian forces have regained territory. Ukraine dug nearly 4,000 kilometres of fortifications across the country this year alone. With heavy defensive works now complete across the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, Ukraine has officially finished construction on one of its main defensive fronts. Every active sector on the front is now less than 15 kilometres from what military analysts are calling the new Donbas Line, the revolutionary fortification standard that completely replaced older 2024-style trenches. So far, Russian forces have only managed to reach 3 specific sections of this new line. At Kuchev Yar, the line successfully absorbed Russian momentum and prevented a major tactical breakthrough. At Novopavlivka, an unfinished section held strong for 10 full months before Ukrainian counterattacks pushed the front line away entirely. And at Shevchenko, south of Dobropilya, Russian assault units are currently attempting to push forward. Pay close attention to Shevchenko. This was the very first section ever built in the new Donbas Line style. It is solid, but because it was a prototype, road coverage wasn't fully integrated into the design yet, a feature added in later iterations. While small Russian infiltration groups might slip through these road gaps, the core strategy of the line isn't total blockage, it's funneling. The line is designed to force Russian armour into key roads straight into pre-prepared killing zones where they can be systematically destroyed. And the Ukrainian artillery, rockets and FPV drones have already ranged into there. They know each location and will have given it a target number and can fire their weapon systems in without having to range their ammunition in to guarantee hitting the targets. In the Velikom-Kavlivka area, dozens of Ukrainian assault groups launched an offensive. The Scalar Regiment first pushed through Ternovy and after clearing it, moved towards the south. Along this route, Ukrainian troops pushed towards Zaporizhzhia and secured the right flank of the attack towards Ternovy. At the same time, Ukraine expanded the breach north of these villages and captured Shenevy. Ukraine effectively regained over 75 kilometres of ground from the Russians. During the operation, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones identified Russian positions and targeted them with artillery, suppressing known fire positions before Ukrainian assault groups entered the settlements. This attack was further supported by FPV drones, which struck Russian soldiers who tried to hide after the artillery barrage. Heavy bomber drones attacked the scattering Russian soldiers by dropping ordnance on them. Russia tried to send reinforcements, but their armoured vehicles were destroyed on the move by other Ukrainian drones, eliminating them before they could help the defending Russians. Here is the strategic takeaway. Across the entire eastern and southern theatre, there's no longer any room for Russian operational manoeuvre beyond 10 kilometres from the active front line. This 10-kilometre band is the absolute maximum amount of land Ukraine is allowing itself to trade in a proactive war of attrition that could stretch well into 2028 and beyond. There's no sign of this war ending anytime early. Russia isn't just fighting Ukrainian troops, it's running face first into an inescapable wall of steel and concrete put in by the Ukrainians. And this is a standard military tactic. It's trading space for time. The one thing the Ukrainians have got across the whole of the front line is a lot of space. We hear of villages being captured. Most of these villages are, in US terms, what I've heard US Air Force commanders describe as being rubbleized. There's nothing left. It's just piles of rubble. But for the Russians to move forward, the war of attrition, the Ukrainians are killing hundreds of them. We're losing, or they're losing, in excess of 1,000 to 1,200 a day. 39,000 to 44,000 a month. And Russia can't sustain that. They cannot get enough troops through their training sausage machine to get them to the front line after getting them to volunteer to be called up in the first place. And whilst Ukraine is doing that, because it's got territory to trade, it is building up its own defensive capabilities. It's building up its own ability to counterattack back in. But again, that is just slowing this Russian advance out, but Ukraine is then using that time to attack deep into Russia, attack the Wildberries logistic distribution centres, the oil and gas sites, Russian command and control, Russian logistic depots, Russian rail logistics, Russian road logistics, stopping Russia being able to come and reinforce its troops at the front line. They're blocking the front line. They're hollowing out from behind at several different levels and several different depths. Eventually, when that hits further steel walls and there's nothing behind it to reinforce it, this Russian advance will collapse. Now let's take a look at the latest Ukrainian precision strike on Russia's supply lines. Here we're looking at a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. The Russian occupying forces in Crimea are suffocating, and Ukrainian drone pilots are the ones who are tightening the noose. The Russian military is desperate to keep its southern garrisons fueled. An escorted convoy of 3 heavy fuel tankers was detected moving through the occupied Zaporizhzhia region near Primorsk, heading straight for Crimea, but they never made it. An escorted convoy of 3 heavy fuel tankers was detected moving through the occupied Zaporizhzhia region near Primorsk, heading straight for Crimea, but they never made it. They were coming along a southern route here that goes past Melitopol and trying to get into Crimea from the north. The Ukrainians are now dominating the whole of this region. This is the land bridge we've talked about beforehand of occupied Ukraine between Crimea and up into Russia. By dominating that, the Ukrainians can control what logistics the Russians can get through here, and they're destroying large parts of it. The biggest casualty is Crimea. Crimea is suffocating. Ukraine is cutting off supplies from the north. It's cutting off supplies across the Kerch Strait, whether it be by bridge or by ferry. It's cutting off any ship movements out of the Sea of Azov or in through the Black Sea. Crimea is becoming a burden to the Russian occupiers. Operators from the 3rd Battalion, the Nazik of the 414th Separate Brigade, better known as the legendary Birds of Magar, ambushed the column. They completely obliterated 2 fuel tankers and their escort vehicle in massive fireballs. Drone footage shows Ukrainian UAVs following behind the unsuspecting Russian vehicle convoy, somehow managing to evade detection as the vehicles travelled along a main road. One by one, the kamikaze drones crashed into the fuel convoy, sending them up in flames before they could get anywhere near their destination of the Crimean Peninsula. The commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, Robert Brovdy, shared the spectacular footage, bluntly mocking the occupiers' logistics nightmare. He said, "Crimea is having a hard time getting gasoline. Only 1 out of 3 survived." The strike near Primorsk isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a systematic, multi-layered campaign to bankrupt Russia's combat logistics. This was a calculated surgical hit by Ukraine's elite unmanned systems forces, executing President Zelensky's strategy of long-range sanctions to literally burn the fuel out of the Russian war machine. Ukraine is proving that you don't need a massive frontal ground assault to defeat an occupying army if you can systematically cut off their lifeblood. And as I described earlier, that lifeblood relies on the logistic routes that are here. Remember, these are the front lines that Russia is fighting on. This is where Ukraine is effectively stopping the Russians. But by attacking the logistic routes behind here and command and control and artillery and other movement of military materiel, this is hollowing out those front lines from behind. You keep hollowing them out, those front lines will collapse. Ukraine is doubling down on a calculated deep strike campaign against Russia's largest e-commerce giant, Wildberries, turning the backbone of the Kremlin's consumer economy into a burning liability. By targeting massive mega hubs from Tula and Moscow to St. Petersburg, Ukrainian long-range drones are not just wiping out critical dual-use logistics, they're inflicting over $1 billion in operational losses, causing widespread supply delays and forcing the economic reality of the war directly into the everyday lives of ordinary Russians. This was the Wildberries Logistics Center in Alskin in Russia's Tula region, situated 120 kilometers south of Moscow. This is Wildberries Alskin now. Ukrainian drones blitzed the site in an overnight attack on August the 5th. This is one of the marketplace's largest distribution facilities. This was Wildberries warehouse in Penza Oblast, a 90,000 square meter regional distribution hub serving the Volga Federal District. This was the warehouse on July the 31st, with orange flames raging after Ukrainian drones attacked overnight, forcing the evacuation of approximately 200 workers. Now, the Wildberries warehouse in St. Petersburg, the port city that was the birthplace of Vladimir Putin. This was the Wildberries Center after drones hit on July the 24th in one of the first strikes on Russia's retail giant. This was the Wildberries logistic hub in Novosomyenko in Russia's Samara region in July. The black smoke is pictured rising from the site after drones bombarded the facility on August the 3rd. But it's not just Russia's retail sector that is being torn apart by Ukrainian drone operators, it's also Russia's oil infrastructure. This was the Bashneft Novoil oil refinery in Ufa, the capital of the Russian Republic of Bashkortostan. And now, 2 separate fires were observed at the refinery, sending thick columns of black smoke into the air. 3 separate drone strikes were reported in the refinery on August the 4th and 5th, now touching on one of your questions in the comments section from last week's episode. What targets could Ukraine look to strike next? This is Russia's largest oil refinery in Western Siberia, the Gazprom facility in Omsk. It was hit by Ukrainian drones on July the 6th, but Ukraine could look to strike again. In a landmark operation last month, the facility was hit, delaying operations at the major site. It was the furthest drone strike into Russia, more than 1,500 miles from the Ukrainian border. Could Ukraine look to strike again? If they were able to bring this massive site down, it would almost certainly bring Putin's oil infrastructure to its knees. This is the Ozon e-commerce center in Nizhny Novgorod, a large city on the Volga River in the west of Russia. The Ozon is one of Russia's largest retail hubs. According to reports inside Russia, there's real concern that Ukraine could look to continue its campaign of targeting the retail sector and sites like Ozon Nizhny in Novgorod, and could be top of the pile of targets. Some of our viewers will remember Operation Spider's Web, a daring Ukrainian attack on 5 air bases across Russia in June 2025. This is the Engels airfield in the Saratov Oblast in western Russia, and the Lipyansk airfield in the northwest of Russia. Both sites have been subject to drone attacks before, but Ukraine could look to strike again. Another significant attack on major Russian airfields would have a lasting and devastating impact on Putin's air force, while also delivering a psychological blow that nowhere inside Russia is safe. Now, touching on another one of your questions from last week's episode, what are the new drones that are coming online for Ukraine? Well, as we've discussed, long-range drones are holding the key for Ukraine, and there are 2 new drones in particular in development that could give operators an added edge. The Hydra Kazakh Ribov digital complex drone. Ukrainian defense technology developer 3D Tech has officially unveiled the Hydra Kazakh drone, a groundbreaking unmanned system engineered specifically for coordinated AI-powered swarm strikes. At the core of the platform are Kazakh FPV drones connected via ultra-thin fibre optic cables, granting them 30-kilometre operational range while rendering them completely immune to Russian electronic warfare and radio jamming. Integrated with advanced AI-assisted target recognition, the system autonomously identifies enemy military hardware and positions, streaming real-time operational feeds directly into Ukraine's Delta battlefield management network. And then, of course, we have the Sting 2 drone. As Russia upgrades its strike fleet with faster jet-powered Shahids capable of reaching speeds of up to 500 kilometers per hour, Ukraine is rapidly evolving its next generation of cheap interceptor drones to keep pace. Domestic innovators like Wild Hornets and Skyfall are completely transforming the economics of air defence by pairing high-speed airframes with extended loitering capabilities and low-latency satellite communications. These ultra-affordable UAVs are knocking down $50,000 Russian strike drones at a tiny fraction of the cost of traditional surface-to-air missiles. The real game changer in this next generation is AI-driven autonomy. Ukraine's newest interceptor systems now automate up to 95% of the engagement cycle with autonomous visual target lock and terminal guidance. The drone independently homes in and neutralises the incoming Shahad in real time. The Sting 2 is being tested and could come online this year. And drones like this are the ones that UK is helping Ukraine to manufacture. These may not necessarily be the ultra-long-range drones. There's a lot more development happening there. We might bring you that in the next episode. That's all for Battle Plans Exposed. If you like what you've seen, please share it amongst your friends. Give us more comments, and thank you for putting your comments in for this week. Give us more comments and ideas, and we'll try and answer your questions next week. But please share us, subscribe, tell everyone about Battle Plans, because our audience is growing, and you're our audience. So thank you for watching. I'm Philip Ingram. Goodbye.